So we actually managed to catch Millennial, first episode. There's a concept that Woes and Sargon stumble around. They're not quite sure, or at least they don't seem quite sure about what it is they're looking at. Sargon tries to think of a word, capital city syndrome, but it's actually an older concept that's been lost to modern dialect, as it were. There's this very simple word for it, which is literally Metropolitanism. Those woke, cultural elite factions with near unlimited wealth, prestige, and influence, completely disconnected from lower classes, living in their own bubble, are always in isolated congregations within the wealthiest of sectors of major metropolitan areas, very much like the socialites of Metropolis, living in complete and utter disregard of the lowly serf drones which make high society possible. I couldn't think of a more accurate term than Metropolitanism. Also explains why people who become wealthy and join that high social status more often than not adopt the socialite, leftist, champagne socialist, capital city politics and worldview. They've figuratively and not been inducted into the cult of woke metropolitanism. Examine 1. With the Brexiter working class against the socialite Remainer, or more accurately stated, nationalist versus internationalist split going on in the UK. 2. Between the people who have to work and experience the violence which diversity has provided them. 3. Where their children can't walk to school without the danger of being raped or murdered in the streets. 4. Without being permitted to speak out against the conditions in which they live. 5. Without being permitted to publicly name those who do them harm. All of those things considered, Metropolis, with its dystopian split between the leisure class of easy living and superfluous activity, bathed in opulence and finery as compared to the drab, lifeless, soulless, hopeless march of drone-like workforce, living in abject misery and unsure as to whether or not they'll actually come home unscathed from work that day. That's quite an allegory for the current situation in the UK and many other white Western nations. The difference is, instead of the devil-like machine waiting to eat them alive, it's the scream of foreign tongues and wanton violence. Cement diversity barriers and fully armed soldiers ready for war decorate the streets to prevent festivities from becoming bloodbaths. Parents fear for their children, children fear for their parents, elders who fought their way through the gates of hell itself on the battlefield to protect their homes from invasion, weep to see their homeland taken over by an enemy invasion more brutal and dictatorial than what they saw cherished friends die to defend against. The light of liberty is dying, being snuffed out, and its death is to the sound of screams as a father is arrested trying to rescue his daughter from a rape dungeon. The sound of sobs as a mother holds what's left of her child whose body was torn apart by a nail bomb for the crime of attending a concert. The sound of a wailing grandfather who tries to hold the hand of his grandson who's been crushed and dragged along the pavement by a truck for the crime of wanting to see the Christmas decorations. The sound of rage as a Slav bashes the display case of a narwhal tusk and uses a pike as his ancestors did less than 300 years ago to once again defend against the ancient enemy which used to capture and sell his people as livestock. Liberty is dying. And what sound I find most egregious is the bemoaning and shrieking of fools and pawns of Metropolitanism who yowl that freedom isn't crumbling fast enough. Once upon a time, Metropolitanism was decried by the left as a bourgeois capitalist method of building elite cities to rule over colonies, such as was argued by anthropologist Robert Rottenberg. Today, however, Looking at the state of Western nations, this exact system of human corrals, ruled over by corruption-infested leftist bureaucracies, creating stronghold voting centers by which to attempt to rule over Western nations, this very same tactic of metropolitanism is in use today. Look at the voting map in the United States, for example. The only blue sectors are the dense population centers, which leftists have infested and secured with political bribery, corrupt bureaucracy, and illegal voting. From within these strongholds, they seek to affect the whole of the nation and rule over vast land masses precisely as leftists themselves criticize colonial metropolitanism for. This is why the left champions the concept of democracy, lowering the voting age, creating sanctuary cities for illegal aliens, and massive welfare systems to bring in and increase in number their human capital. People under their direct authority, sprawling dystopian metropolis-style slavery. They seek to seize control over the nation by means of human pens, filled with herds of voters who live or starve by their good graces as they present themselves as supposedly beneficent rulers. This is metropolitanism.